Hey, welcome everyone to the Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club's public safety conversation. My name is Steven Schiavone. I'm doing the logistics. I'm going to turn it over to our president, Derek Neighbors. Derek?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Derek Neighbors, president of Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club. Before we begin our meeting, I would like to share two of our upcoming events. On Wednesday, May 18th, 2023, we are hosting a discussion with Montgomery County Council Chair Evan Glass and council members Kate Stewart and Lorianne Sales. 7 p.m. at Tacoma Middle School on Piney Branch Road. Please join us to meet the county council members and share your thoughts. And lastly, on Saturday, June 24th, from 1 to 5 p.m., is our big annual Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club picnic. This year will be held at the Silver Spring American Legion at Sligo Avenue and Fenton Street. Hope to see you there. Tonight's meeting is for a discussion on safety and crime prevention in Silver Spring. Alan Bowser is an active Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club member and advocate for keeping Silver Spring safe, and will introduce tonight's speakers. Alan, take it away.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you everybody who's joined us this evening. The Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club wants to reach out to all members of the community and to facilitate information that would be useful in their everyday lives. We're very lucky this evening to have two outstanding guests, State's Attorney John McCarthy and Montgomery County Chief of Police Marcus Jones. I'm going to read a little bit of their biographies, and then both of them are going to make presentations, and then we'll be able to ask them questions. All questions are welcome. Please put your questions in the chat. We're going to try to handle it that way. So let me just start with an introduction to Marcus Jones. Marcus Jones grew up in Virginia. He joined the Montgomery County Police Department in 1985 after majoring in business administration at the University of Maryland. He's been with the Montgomery County Police Department for 37 years. After serving as a police officer and detective for 15 years, Jones rose steadily to sergeant in 2000, lieutenant in 2004, and captain in 2011. He also served as the drug enforcement commander, headed up the Major Crimes Division, and was commander of the Silver Spring Division, our 3rd District. In that capacity, he demonstrated a strong commitment to the community and was always available to our Silver Spring neighbors. In 2018, he was promoted to assistant chief and supervised all investigation divisions. He was appointed chief of police in November 2019 by County Executive Mark Elrich. Our other guest is State's Attorney John McCarthy. John McCarthy, like me, grew up in New Jersey. He attended Catholic University on a baseball scholarship. Following his graduation from Catholic, he taught at Good Counsel High School in Wheaton, and while teaching, he attended law school in the evenings at the University of Baltimore. He graduated from law school in 1979. He was admitted to private practice in the Maryland Bar in 1979 and began his legal career in private practice. He joined the state's attorney's office for Prince George's County in 1980, and 18 months later became a public defender in Montgomery County. John joined the state's attorney's office for Montgomery County in 1982. Before becoming Montgomery County State's Attorney in 2006, John served as Deputy State's Attorney in Montgomery County for 10 years. Prior to that, John had headed every major trial division in the office. His biography notes, he's the father of 4 and grandfather to 5. We'll start off our presentations tonight with Montgomery County's Chief of Police, the Honorable Marcus Jones. Welcome, Chief Jones.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. It's a pleasure as always. And thank you to the Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club, to the president, Mr. Neighbors. Thank you all for having us this evening. I just want to briefly, I know there's lots to talk about, but I want to share my screen because I also want to provide some updates to this group about our what is occurring in Montgomery County currently as it relates to crime, so we can have that conversation. So let's see if I can get this to be shared, and then we'll start the show. Okay, all right, I think everybody can see that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I do want to just briefly note currently that we are seeing some trends moving back upward, particularly over the past couple of years as we are starting to transition out of COVID. You are starting to see our crime levels rise, even more so than probably in 2019, which was pre-COVID. We are seeing an increase in our violent crimes, and we're going to have a conversation about that, as well as many of our nonviolent crimes. One of the things that you see significantly that has gone down is the number of drug offenses that have gone, and a lot of that has really centered around a change of focus, particularly as we move towards the legalization of marijuana, and how we've been in the decriminalization of marijuana over the past few years, where we're really, again, limiting, and really our change and focus now completely around drugs really is primarily focused on the increase of availability of fentanyl in our community, which is at an all-time high. So next slide, I just want to highlight the fact that so far this year, our homicides are down compared to last year. We actually have 10 homicides thus far this year. The good news is that we've been able to pretty much close over 70% of those cases that we currently have. We have some really good leads in some of the other cases, but we still have some open cases that we're actively working. I know the Silver Spring area is very concerned about the incident that we had in December in downtown Silver Spring at our parking garage. We are still actively working that investigation and working with the family on working some leads as we move forward with that. The one thing that is really that needs to be highlighted is the fact that our robberies are up considerably this year. And really the big jump that we see is carjackings. I know this is much of in the news and in the media, but again, we've had considerable numbers of carjackings in 2023. Last I heard, we had 37 that was compared to about 11 last year. We have made arrests in about 36% of those cases. Last night was a prime example. We did have a carjacking in Silver Spring last night. The good news is that we made 3 arrests in that particular case. Unfortunately, these 3 young individuals, and I do say young because they were 13, 14, and 15 years of age, were actually took the car, crashed in several locations in the county, but were actually captured in Prince George's County and in the District of Columbia. So those individuals have been arrested and charged. But it's very disturbing to see that trend when we see particularly our young people who are involved in these types of offenses of carjackings, of taking violently taking vehicles from individuals. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is about weapons. We have seen an incredible increase in weapons offenses in the county. Particularly, we see that when you see of 169 weapon offenses that we've had thus far this year, 73% of those are in possession of weapons who are legally, who cannot carry them, or they're concealed. And that the majority of those cases we are seeing that are actually involved in over half. When we say weapon offenses, many of them are occurring in Down County, but we're also seeing them all over the county. Also, again, this is a map just to go back to the carjackings. If you look at the red dots, those are the locations in the county where we've seen carjackings mostly occur. So where my cursor is downtown Silver Spring. And then you can see again along, again towards Hillendale area, Piney Branch, all in up and down the eastern part of the county. You see a few more up northern county, but you see the vast majority of your carjackings are occurring in the lower half of the county. And again, theft from autos continue to be a major issue. And that's a major issue that we have had for many years. And again, looking at the high density areas of theft from autos, you still see Silver Spring being highly impacted by theft from autos. These are majority, but not all. Majority of these cases involve mostly are many of our victims leaving car doors unlocked. As we know, individuals will go through neighborhoods checking car doors, but we've also had incidents of individuals who will break glass when they see visible property that is visible to them, and they take the risk on breaking glass from that aspect. I do want to go back a little bit to talk about, as I was talking about before, about weapons offenses. And I do want to talk about the discharging of weapons, where we've had non-contact shootings as well as contact shootings along the way. And in that regard, again, we've seen the 3rd district that is responsible for over half of these incidents that involve the discharging of weapons. We've had 21 thus far this year. And again, the 3rd district has had the highest number. And again, as we again focus on illegal guns as it relates to not only just legal weapons, but as we all know, there are ghost guns that have been, again, that we see often in our county, and we're continuing to actually find and seize those weapons. So I just wanted to give an update as it related to crime. I'll turn it back over to you, Alan. I don't know if you want me to answer questions now. I'll wait till after Mr. McCarthy, and then we both can kind of join the.
Let's take the state. Let's ask the state's attorney to make a presentation. Then we'll open up to questions, if that's okay with you, John.
That's perfectly fine with me. I'm good. Okay, John.
Just as Marcus wanted to thank all of you for allowing us to be here. I'm honored to be here with Marcus. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Derek. And there's a lot of fabulous people that I've worked with in the community that I see that are joining us here today. So thank you for the partnerships we've had over the years. But I'm going to try to confine my comments as I go through some of this preliminary stuff. I got a letter from Alan about some of the things he wanted me to touch upon, and I'm going to run through some things very quickly. Just an overview of the office. First of all, I have 170 people that work for me. 85 of them are lawyers. We handle about 25,000 criminal matters a year in Montgomery County. We're divided into 3 major divisions. We have a district court division, a juvenile division, and a circuit court division where major crimes like carjackings, robberies, and murders are handled. We do have specialty teams where there are groups of men and women who receive special training to handle cases like homicides or carjackings. We have a general felony division, which is where that's the entrance level for the attorneys in my office handling felonies. That might be, it could be a drug distribution case. It could actually be an auto theft. It could be some kind of an aggravated theft. We have a gang unit that concentrates on addressing gang crime throughout our entire county. And we do have gangs in Montgomery County. We have a specialized white collar crime unit where people are trained on how to investigate and assist people who've been the victims of financial crimes here in the community. And they seem to particularly target our senior community. We have a special victims unit that also handles cases like sexual assaults against women, domestic violence, and crimes against children. And finally, we have a community outreach division that we are out in the street all the time. The head of my community outreach division.
Are you muted?
A gentleman probably known to most of you, George Sims, who is absolutely the senior attorney in my entire office, but we're out in the community all the time. Within my office, 68% of my lawyers are women. More women have graduated from American law school since 1990, and every single calendar year. I joined an office that had a handful of women. Quite candidly, the majority of my lawyers, the majority of my team leaders, and my deputy, they are females. Key issues, and I think Marcus talked about them, and I'm just going to tick them off, and I'm sure that through the questions we can be more specific about it. Key issues to me, I think it is the scourge of fentanyl. Marcus and I have been together with the superintendent of schools, because last year in the school year, this was even a shocking number to me, to find out that 11 of our school students in Montgomery County schools died as a result of fentanyl overdoses. We've had 4 more this year. We had this crazy event that happened in College Garden just yesterday, where 3 7-year-olds found a bag that had some kind of a drug in it, still yet to be determined, but they thought it was candy. It was found on the ground near a school. I think it was College Gardens Elementary. Marcus's people are looking at it. So we have the fentanyl scourge. The handgun issue that we have in the community is alarming. A component part of that are the ghost guns, which invariably fall into the hands of 2 categories of people from my standpoint. People under the age of 21 because they can't legally buy a gun, or prohibited people who individually have already been convicted of prior felonies and they're prohibited to get a licensed gun in New Jersey. So they were buying these ghost guns. One of the things that saddens me, that I think makes us less safe, and I maybe invite the chief to comment about this. There was a new bill that was passed by the legislature. This is one of our key issues, one of our challenges. 75% of the guns seized out of cars in Montgomery County were seized as a result of the odor of marijuana coming from the car and the officers searching the car. The Maryland legislature just passed legislation last week making it illegal for us to do that. And they also made it illegal for us, if we get to the car and we're searching it because of marijuana, even if the driver consents, they've made it illegal for us to use that evidence. We are leaving 75% of the guns that Marcus's fine officers would have been seizing off the streets are going to be left on the streets. I think it's a terrifying thought. Carjackings, Marcus touched upon it. Other things, key issues for us, reopening the pre-release center. Many of us in this community are interested in making sure that the people who are removed from the community because they've committed a violent crime come back safer and better. We have had our pre-release center closed for years because of COVID. The good news here is we're about to reopen the pre-release center, which I think finds jobs and housing for people as they re-enter the community. I love that. And the diversionary program, Alternative Community Service, where we diverted about 2,000 people a year out of the criminal justice system, went dormant during COVID. It's coming back as well. That's another piece of good news. One of the key components of what we're doing in the state's attorney's office is always education. Just last week, and I know Marcus was there, we had a program down at the Wheaton Rec Center called Choose Respect, where we educate, we use education to solve criminal justice issues in Montgomery County, and the police department and the state's attorney's offices are both intimately involved in this. The other program in Wheaton the other day was about advising and talking to young people as they begin their young dating relationships about the proper parameters of respect to try to avoid there being abuse in dating relationships with young kids. And we know that 1 out of 3 dating relationships have abuse in it. Speak Up, Save a Life. This is a program I have gone to every high school, my office, and I've done most of them personally myself. I've spoken in every high school in the county about the fentanyl scare and what obligation these kids have about calling up, because I talked to them about the Good Samaritan doctrine. I would rather a child called and saved the life of a friend of theirs who might be dying of an overdose rather than worry about me prosecuting them for a minor drug charge. I promise them I will not do that. So we have Speak Up, Save a Life. We had a gun safety program that we ran in the fall with and in cooperation with Montgomery County Public Schools, urging kids to become, to some extent, the eyes and ears of of the police regarding guns that are taken into public schools. We have a truancy program for Montgomery County schools run by my office. We have an anti-bullying program. We have an internet safety program. And we also have, I think if you're over the age of 65 and you live in Montgomery County, I've met you because you've been at one of my elder abuse training programs where we try to teach people, particularly when it comes to financial crimes and neglect, not to become a victim of crime. The last thing I'm going to touch upon and is because there was a question in Alan's letter to me about what do you do regionally to cooperate with one another? Well, I can tell you, I know that both Marcus and I are involved in multiple regional task forces. There is a task force for carjacking. There are intergovernmental organizations that deal with drug distribution. Marcus's people are probably even more intimately involved in those than mine. I will also tell you the chief himself is he is the head of one of 9 police departments in Montgomery County. We have 9 departments. Quarterly, Chief Jones hosts and I attend these meetings with all 9 departments. We talk about strategies for how we're going to deal with crime throughout Montgomery County and in partnership, not just with the state's attorney's office and Montgomery County Police, but the other 8 agencies that are here. We are interacting with 9 total agencies. And the last thing that I will tell you that I'm intimately involved in is the Maryland State's Attorneys Association. There are 24 state's attorneys in Maryland. I am one of 24. I happen to have the largest, in terms of population, jurisdiction. When it goes to those meetings, I get 1 vote. There's 1.2, I get 1 vote. Other counties have 30,000 people. They get 1 vote too. And the majority of state's attorneys around the state are actually Republican, not Democrats. So in any instance, we are intimately involved. I work with a statewide organization of assistant state's attorneys, and we collectively go down, and I spent a lot of time in the legislature this year. We are down there. I don't know how often Marcus goes down there, but I'm in Annapolis at least 1 day a week during the legislative session, urging what I think are sensible pieces of legislation that help us do our jobs better and keep you safe. I'll stop, and Alan, I'll let you. I tried to touch on what you said in the letter and did it quickly, but I hope some of that information helps.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to know, and I think it's a value to our audience. There's a couple of questions in the chat, both important issues. I've got some myself, but let's start with the questions in the chat. We'll start with a hard one, actually. Chief Jones, Lynn Olson is asking about the Jawando Mink legislation having to do with traffic stops. And you've been strong in your criticism about that. And I wonder if you could say more about that and address her question. Are there disparities and the value of traffic stops as you see them?
Absolutely. So, and Lynn, thank you for the question. Lynn asked the question about why I believe that the report from Office of Legislative Oversight is wrong in saying there's racial disparities. And what I center that on is in our profession, in the policing profession, it is widely known and has been researched in many different aspects. I highlight 2013, the National Institute of Justice, NIJ, published an article on racial profiling in traffic stops, in which it stated that due to differences in driving patterns, social scientists now disregard comparisons to the census for assessing racial bias. And so the Office of Legislative Oversight compared census data. They did not compare driving population data in Montgomery County. And one of the things I've stressed is we know that Montgomery County is a very transient location because of the different of individuals who come in into Montgomery County from who are from outside, but who actually work in Montgomery County or in fact drive through Montgomery County. And so with that being said, I think that there needs to be a better done. There's research that needs to be done in a different manner from that perspective. Now, I'll also state this about Mr. Jawando's bill in this regard. I think, again, first and foremost, I will say that I think that his bill oversteps its boundaries from a local jurisdiction that I don't believe, because the Maryland Transportation article is a state article that of state laws. These are state traffic laws, and it notes in the transportation article that no local authority can disregard what the state has put into place. So again, I think, again, from that perspective, I don't think that this law would be justified and would be allowable. Now, the other thing I have grave concerns about is the reality in traffic enforcement is that, pedestrian and traffic collision deaths, we have in Montgomery County traditionally, every year we have more traffic fatalities and pedestrian fatalities than we have homicides in Montgomery County. I think it will hamper traffic safety. I think it has a lot of issues that surround that. In regards, I think when you have us not having the ability to stop individuals who have bad registration, tags, unregistered motor vehicles, uninsured motor vehicles, I think that is a dangerous place to put, that there will be no enforcement from the police standpoint and allow these individuals to drive in our counties and be a danger. So those are some of the major topics that why I stress that I'm against this legislation.
State's Attorney, do you have any comment on this particular issue? I'd like to move into the question of racial disparities and how you perceive them, both from your different offices. But what about the traffic stop legislation? Think it's a good idea or it's very problematic?
Rather than, I don't think I'm going to really address the particular piece of legislation. I have had conversations with the chief about this before, and I knew what his feelings were about this. I'm going to just talk about how you gather data. And I will say to you, the demographics in Montgomery County differ wildly based on age. What this county looks like over the age of 60 versus what this county looks like under 20 is night and day. And why is that important? Well, I think it's important because I know from social science research that when young people get involved in crime, very typically it's mainly between the ages of 15 and 25. And almost everybody ultimately ages out of being involved in criminal behavior. They become assimilated into the community and things like that. So when you're looking at these numbers, overall data numbers, I think that to some extent if you want to get meaningful looks at what's happening in terms of the racial disparities, you want to look at ages. You want to look at compare the numbers to the age groups. What do we look like between 15 and 25? And I also think because of the way in which there is a free flow of between the jurisdictions that we abut, I think that when you're looking at these demographics, I think you look at the demographics. We are a region. We are a county, but we are a region. And so if you really want to critically look at the numbers, I think it's fair to look at the numbers. And quite candidly, I'm doing that in my own office because I've got this outside organization, PPI, that's looking at the numbers in Montgomery County. So I'm actively involved in looking at ethnicity and race and how it's reflected in the criminal justice system. We're doing that every day with this PPI study. But I also think that if you really want to see what's going on and make fair comparisons, you have to look at the region. And I think you want to really drill down to the ages where we know that the majority of crime is committed. And some of the other numbers don't really tell you much. They're really not instructive of what's happening. So I think numbers, again, transparency is important. I know that Marcus wants transparency. I want transparency, but we want meaningful numbers that are not being misused for reasons that don't really make us safe.
One of the questions that we got before this meeting was from Tony Hauser, who reminds us that you commissioned a study on racial disparities for the state's attorney's office. You just referenced that. He wanted to know, when is that study being completed and when will it be released?
Well, I want to say hello to my good friend Tony Hausner, who's been a friend of mine for many, many years and a strong ally for public safety in Silver Spring. Let me say, for those of you who are not familiar with this, I became the first state's attorney in the state of Maryland to commission an outside agency to come in to look critically at who we charge and who we don't charge and what that says in terms of race, ethnicity, etc. Who's doing the study for us? It's Loyola University in Chicago. It is the University of Maryland Graduate School is really the primary person doing this. Florida International. It also includes Microsoft is underwriting this. And since I started this program, Microsoft is now proposing to bring what I'm doing in Montgomery County to the entire state. And I have been joined by Frederick County, Prince George's County, and Charles County. Instead of there being one county now with PPI, there are 4. And Tony, we are very close. We are working on our dashboards. We have hired someone to design those dashboards. I am hoping that within the next 60 days, our first dashboards are going to be put out. We're going to have a press conference about it. And each month we're going to focus in on, we have created an entire calendar for the next 12 months. And each month we're going to focus on individual areas on our dashboards that we're going to release. And I think the study itself is going to be released by PPI within the next 30 to 60 days. I've seen the preliminary report. We're working on the dashboards. We're practically there. And I also want to correct something else. We didn't pay a penny for this. No, Montgomery County did not pay a penny for this because it was underwritten by the MacArthur Foundation and Microsoft. So there was some talk about what this was costing the county to do. It was free to the citizens of Montgomery County because we have people that are interested in social justice that underwrote this on a national basis. And Microsoft and the MacArthur Foundation are doing that all over the country. Tony, it's coming. We're about 60 days away.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen in the chat, you can see a common concern which is being expressed by Elaine, who says that she's afraid to come to downtown Silver Spring. That's a conversation that we've had over the last couple of years. It's gotten worse. Several hundred people joined Councilmember Glass and Councilmember Stewart at a public safety forum at the Civic Building a couple of weeks ago. I'm curious, State's Attorney, about your deployment of some of your prosecutors to downtown Silver Spring. But Chief, first, can you just quickly tell us how you're gearing up to address the spike in crime in downtown Silver Spring? It does seem to be, pretty impactful.
Yes, absolutely, Alan. And so undoubtedly, we have listened to many individuals in Silver Spring, not only just the people who reside there, but also from the Chamber of Commerce and Commander McBain under his leadership and has been directed by me in order to get as many resources as necessary in order for us to be very proactive and be highly visible in downtown Silver Spring. I've utilized resources such as additional resources of our Special Operations Division as well as our Traffic Division to show high visibility and presence in downtown Silver Spring. We have added license plate readers along different areas in downtown Silver Spring to focus on vehicles that are involved in violent offenses. that helps to alert us. And officers are able to gather that information rather rapidly. I've also created a violent crime information center, which is like a real-time crime center. It's best described. I have 2 analysts that are working in that crime center. It is my desire to get that crime center working 7 days a week. Right now, we're in a 5-day week rotation. But we are tapped into cameras, particularly along in the downtown Silver Spring area. Not only are we tapped into cameras that we have deployed, particularly may have noticed on Georgia Avenue, there is a large camera that has a blue light that is flashing. Well, that's a camera. We're able to actually observe that real time. We've also put one on, and we've deployed it in different areas along Fenton Street. We'll be looking at doing that same thing around the Colesville and Wayne corridor. And again, also by tapping into some other governmental facilities that will be able to, again, assist our officers with focusing on crime in Silver Spring and getting our officers to the area rather quickly should anything transpire. I'd also note that we are upgrading all of the cameras through County Executive Elrich's leadership in all of our parking garages. Many of those cameras were outdated. They needed to be severely updated. We're working with the Department of Transportation in order to upgrade those cameras, and those will also be, again, accessible through our Violent Crime Information Center. One thing I do want to note is that we're excited. We're hoping that the council will approve the funding for a pilot for a drone program that is going to be our first responder drone program. Well, we will have a drone that will be able to be deployed from one of our high rises in Silver Spring, and it will be responding only to calls for service that will allow us to get it in a 2-mile radius to help us to identify suspects that are involved in criminal activity. So we're very excited about that. That has been proven to be very productive in places such as Chula Vista, California. They are one of the pioneer police departments that have started this. And we are looking to, again, communicate this out with our public once we work through this with our county council in our upcoming budget season.
Let me ask the state's attorney, John, what is SAO doing to support Commander McBain and the chief in Silver Spring?
Well, let me just make one comment. First of all, I think McBain has done a terrific job. I don't know if anybody's met Dave is a really a proactive guy, and I think he's done a wonderful job down there. And coming out of COVID in particular, without getting into it, I thought there were a lot of really difficult issues that were emanating from what appeared to be a lot of open air drug marketing of drugs near the Civic Center. And that really, I thought, became the hub of what was happening. And I think they made tremendous strides in dealing with that particular issue down there. I will tell you, in terms of my own resources, I've met with Dave McBain. This probably goes back 18 months or 2 years ago. And we put together a task force. I have a couple of assistants who are assigned uniquely and specifically to prosecute the cases that come out of that central business district in Silver Spring. They know the problem and know the officers, and they know the issues of what we're trying to achieve, so that they're more familiar with the issues. They're familiar with the feelings of the community, but they also can educate judges so that we get better, appropriate sentences out of those cases, because we see what is destabilizing people down there. I would also say to you, one of the other things is that the county has also been trying, because a lot of the violence occurs after hours. I mean, I don't know if Marcus has spoken to this yet, but a lot of the violence in the Silver Spring corridor, it's like Friday, Saturday nights between like midnight and 5 o'clock in the morning. And so one of the things we became concerned about is again, trying to attack it every way you possibly can. We've had licensing people going down to after what became after hours places where people began to migrate, that where we've had shootings and violence occur outside of different places. So we have licensing people on late nights in the middle of the night checking to make sure that there's not licensing violations. If there are hub places that are maybe carrying on and serving alcohol or having activities taking place that are keeping the violence alive in Silver Spring later into the morning. I also think one of the things we've got to look at, and this may be a county council issue, and it was being discussed at the time, shortening the hours that businesses can remain open into the night, because a lot of our activity was between midnight and 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I think that we have some licensing issues. I think we have some issues about how late we allow these establishments to remain open, because Silver Spring did become sort of a mecca, not just for Montgomery County residents, but people from other jurisdictions who came in because we kept our businesses open later. And when they came in late at night after doing whatever they were doing, sometimes they brought with them other issues that we didn't want in Silver Spring. Obviously, I think the death of the gentleman who was the 62-year-old gentleman from Silver Spring, who died when he was, bringing his food back to his car, that remains unsolved, is something that I think that has concerned everybody. I think that's created a lot of fear in that community, but I think there's been some improvement, and I think the chief is also operating under, for whatever it's worth, we need more officers. We need more officers. We need everybody in this community. If you want a safer community, we need more boots on the ground. We need people that care about their community, that want to get engaged in this. Some of our recruit classes, and the chief hasn't said it, look, we got sometimes more people going out the back door leaving than coming in the front door. Some of our classes where we want to have 50, 60 people in the class, maybe the last class was a reasonable class of 30 or 40 people, but we've had classes of 9, 12. We need more officers. We need more good people that are interested in public safety to come in here and take those jobs. And it's, can I say to you, we want a diverse force too. That's a hard sell. That's a hard sell to get young people to say, you know what, I want to be a police officer. I want to go down and make my community safer. So we need more good young people in this community, men and women, to come in and want to be police officers to help us. We need community support, and we need the community support. We need to work together, not constantly pit each other against it. We need to work together. Marcus is a great chief. He can't do it without community support. I can't do anything without community support. We've got to work together.
You guys just raised two issues that I think need some further explanation. So one of the debates we've had in downtown Silver Spring is the question of whether or not it's late night or it's daylight. The carjackings have happened during daylight. The county council has come up with a plan to regulate late night enterprises that would stay open until 6 o'clock in the morning. From my conversations, from the group online chats that we've had, the community seemed to be pretty strongly in favor of having businesses closed by 3 o'clock in the morning. So there wouldn't be this disparity between Prince George's County, DC, and Silver Spring. And so the carjackings seem to be, they're daylight, early evening. We're not, doesn't seem now that we're seeing the type of crime in the evening. And then the second point, and address both of these issues as you'd like, is a question of more cops. So there's a group, there are people in our community who don't think we should have more cops on the street. They think it's a bad look. They think it's going to facilitate interactions between law enforcement and brown and black people. Other people would like to see more visibility. They'd like to see more police cars. They'd like to see what they do in DC, which is when the cruisers drive around, they have the blue lights on. They don't really tolerate people who are, double parked outside of Popeyes. They want to urge people to move on. I'm wondering if you've got something you want to share about the question about visibility and then daytime versus nighttime. Chief, why don't you go first?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. And you're spot on. I mean, it's undoubtedly in my mind, I think we have found that when we are highly visible in our community, that we see crime actually numbers go down. And when you have the amount of officers available in order to have that visibility, and you're exact, many of your folks are right when we talk about some of the events that were occurring in daytime hours just recently, it warranted us to actually add resources, as I noted before, where I actually had our traffic division, which is a centralized traffic unit that goes around, and we focus on our major corridors for enforcement and education. But the added part to that was the added visibility when we put them in downtown Silver Spring, and then we saw a drop in numbers of incidents that were occurring during the daytime hours. I will tell you, you know, it is undoubtedly so that carjackings can occur at any time. Again, these are crimes of opportunity. I cannot give you why these carjackings are occurring because many of these individuals have different motivations behind why they're doing what they're doing. These individuals are from Montgomery County. They're from Prince George's County. They're from the District of Columbia. They're from all over. And again, you know, whether it's they just need a ride home, that they've decided to take this risk in committing this crime. And sometimes we've seen that. And then sometimes it's about sort of just the thrill of being able to carjack one car, going and then in the midst of committing another violent crime, whether it's a robbery or another carjacking, we have seen much of that. So again, it is notably so that we are down with our complement of officers, but I will say, Mr. McCarthy is right. John is right. We have to understand. You know, I understand what people's concerns are about hiring more police officers, but this community is 1.1 million people, and Silver Spring has changed from what it looked like even just 10 years ago. It is a vibrant community. As you see the growth in not only businesses, but you also see the growth of apartment buildings. What has not grown is the number of police officers that work in the downtown area. It has not increased in the nighttime hours either. And that's something that we are taking a hard look at about redeploying officers in many of our more highly populated areas and higher crime areas in the county, because that is something that is significant, particularly as it relates to calls for service. So from that standpoint, it is undoubtedly so. As it relates to the late night hour with the businesses, it is true. We have seen significant upticks with some activity in the late night hours. That is, again, we have added overtime details in order to address that, to have more officers visible around many of the businesses that remain open after 3 o'clock. Many are staying open till 5. We have had shootings in the late night hours that have impacted some residents in the downtown area. Those are concerning. So that is why we've added those additional resources, because it's vitally important for us to understand that, again, we are dealing with the changed environment of downtown Silver Spring with the late night activity. But again, this is now a place that is very active for the most part, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week now.
State's Attorney McCarthy.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, I think I would probably be redundant of a lot of the things Marcus already said. I think we have to look at the hours. I don't understand why, and I saw some of the chat that came through. We've got to force the county council to maybe restrict the number of hours that businesses can be open. It does affect public safety. I think we, you know, obviously want to continue our efforts to recruit more people so that we can grow those numbers. Look, I fundamentally do believe the presence of police, and we have a good police department in Montgomery County, deters crime. And they are being better trained now than ever in their history under Marcus's leadership. And we you know, and quite candidly, if they don't act properly, I'm going to tell you, they'll get criminally prosecuted. And there are instances, like the last case I tried was an off-duty Pentagon officer who killed two people behind 7333 New Hampshire Avenue. I personally handled that case. If someone violates someone's civil rights or commits a crime as an officer, and it is rare, they will be held accountable. And Marcus wants him held accountable, and so do I. And by the way, the irony is so do the men and women of the police department, because they're proud of their department. And so, but in any instance, I don't want to repeat what Marcus has said. I think he captured almost all the same thoughts I had.
So one of the questions that pops up periodically in forums such as this are questions of police misconduct. So personally, my sense is that there isn't a lot of police misconduct in Montgomery County. One of the questions is that 2 years ago, the Montgomery County Council passed a law that required MCPD to issue a use of force policy that protects vulnerable populations within 6 months of the bill's passage. When can we expect to have a police use of force policy that protects these vulnerable populations? Can you talk about that policy, Chief?
Well, I will say our current use of force policy does protect individuals in our vulnerable populations. In fact, the state of Maryland actually legislated, the legislature passed a law in last year that required us to revise our use of force policy to meet their standard. And we went well above that, which that policy is above what the county council passed. And so we revised that policy. But one thing I want to note that needs to be clarified. You will see in our annual use of force, and as it relates to, we talk about the vulnerable population, for example, individuals who have mental health issues, the like. What you will see is we report out on the most minor use of force. For example, when you have an individual who has a mental illness, who is been deemed to be unsafe to themselves or others, and needs to be taken to an emergency room to have an emergency evaluation, we will again, once we have the authority to take those individuals into custody. Many of those individuals don't want to go to the hospital, and it's because it's involuntary. And again, because we have the authority by law to actually take them to be evaluated, any resistance on their behalf, if we have to just even if go to grab their arm and they pull away, we will document just to be able to put them into custody. We will highlight that as a use of force because someone is not voluntarily complying with the order. So you will see our numbers be higher than most jurisdictions. And the other part is because we've been so restrictive, our officers know that they have to report out on all uses of force. And so officers don't want to get themselves into any trouble in policy. And we've seen cases where they've actually reported use of force, and it's been the slightest use of force. It is even difficult for us to see it. And every use of force that's report that's done in every instance, it has to be done by departmental policy. It is mandatory that all police executives that fall under their command will review that use of force. And any use of force that is not under or within our policy is then sent through the assistant chief to internal affairs for review. And I will tell you, we take that very seriously. But I will say that we have applied our use of force policy, which again is online, and again it's very restrictive as required by the state.
State's Attorney McCarthy, do you have the sense that I have, that the prevalence of quote unquote police misconduct is less in Montgomery County than it might be in some neighboring jurisdictions?
One of the reasons, my direct answer is yes to your question. But I've also felt, and I thought this for a very long time, one of the things that we always had here as a requirement in Montgomery County is you to have basically the functional equivalent of 2 years of college to become a Montgomery County officer. I think that, and the vast majority of our officers have graduated from college. Some have master's degrees. Some have attended law school. The composition of the men and women who serve as police officers in Montgomery County, beginning with like the college requirement, I think that gives you a slice above. It gives you a quality officer initially that is better than most departments. Just so to some extent, quite candidly, we want to diversify our police department. Sometimes those educational requirements making those diverse hires a little harder for you. But it's a really kind of like that qualification, I think, has served us well, but maybe it affects our ability to recruit the diversity. Like, let me say to you, I think being a police officer today, one of the things that I found is so much harder because a stunning fact. When President Obama released Policing in the 21st Century in 2015, and that was a study where the chair was former Chief Ramsey from downtown, who ultimately became the chief in Philadelphia. They published a number that I thought was staggering. This was in 2015. They say that 50%, 1 out of 2 of all police contacts in the country, the person on 1 out of 2 times, the person that you're having contact with has a mental health issue in play. Mental health, and as a result, I think one of the things that's done here in Montgomery County, and the chief can maybe speak more directly to it, but we do crisis intervention training now for everybody, mental health training, and quite candidly, I'm proud of that. I think it's over thousands of officers have now gotten that training. To me, it seems incredible to me that we ever let anyone be on the street policing anywhere in America without crisis intervention training so that they could recognize the signs of mental illness and react appropriately to the person that they're confronting on the street. Sadly, of police incidences that lead to death in the United States, 1 out of every 4 of them, the person whose life is lost is in the middle of a mental health crisis. Crisis intervention training, which is now uniform, is really important. And another thing that we're doing, I think, that's going to make those populations, Alan, that you were talking about, safer, is we are adopting and trying to hire and create more dual responder teams, where when there is a crisis, we want to respond appropriately, and the dual responder team will have a police officer be there to maintain the safety and security of the person whose background might be psychology or psychiatrist, or a social worker will go and we'll have a more intelligent response. And I mean, maybe the chief would talk about these dual responder teams. We are attempting to put more of them in place in the county. Unfortunately, because we don't have as many as we should have, sometimes it takes 25, 30 minutes for a dual responder team to get to a critical incident. And sometimes it doesn't end as well as it could have if we'd had more of those dual responder teams with specially skilled people who could get to the scene and deal with the mental health challenge. The mental health challenge that really is what the police officer is being confronted with. So, I mean, that's a huge part of safe policing here. And I think there's been some attempts through crisis intervention training, the dual responder teams. We're trying to be more intelligent about how we do that for those populations that I think your question really was asking about, and how we're protecting them and dealing with them more safely in the community.
Chief, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. So we are, there are approximately 75% of our officers have been trained in CIT. When I say, and the vast majority of that 75% is actually in our patrol bureau. When we look at the other 25%, many of them have other functionalities that don't necessarily deal with the mentally ill in their capacities as a police officer. I will say that all 100% of our officers have mental health first aid. So all of them have that. So any officer that's responding, and majority of our officers that are responding to these incidents are crisis intervention trained officers. I will also note that we have initiated sort of a crisis team concept of responding. We have placed them down at the Mid-County Regional Center on Reedy Drive. That's where their office is. They are monitoring the 3rd district, which is Silver Spring, as well as the 4th district, to be able to respond to any call where we're dealing with individuals that are mentally ill. It may be a mentally ill type of a call. And they also have, they will have a counselor from HHS that works with them, a trained counselor that also will be riding with them. And as John was noting about the dual response, as we also know that we have collectively in HHS, they have increased their mobile crisis teams. We are again, as many times noting that, there are many calls that go out that are not police related mental health type calls. And I've spoken to this so many times. And I am grateful that HHS has been able to take some of the load off and be able to send their mobile crisis teams to these calls. But they are, again, that is, again, because of the high nature of these types of calls. Just in last month, as an example, I would say February numbers, we responded to 697 calls that had some mental health component. And that's generally about the number of calls, 700 calls that we have per month. That it kind of equates to about 25 calls a day. And so even with mobile crisis teams, that's a significant challenge for them to be able to respond to all of those calls. So it gives us a little bit of context to how many issues that are actually in our community that needs to be dealt with on a daily basis.
There's a issue that pops up in the chat periodically, which has to do with another police district for Silver Spring, whether or not having another facility in downtown Silver Spring would make a difference to prevalence of crime during the day or in the evening.
Right.
Some of your predecessors, and let me just say here that we love Commander McBain, but he's the second best 3rd district commander that we've had over the course of the last 20 years. Do you think having a new police district, another physical building in downtown Silver Spring, which is more visible, would affect crime?
Yeah, I do. I think that definitely, I think because of the growth of Silver Spring, the growth of, of the county in that lower section, I would highly agree that I think that is worthwhile. So I have said this probably for about 5 years now. I made this known when I was the commander in the 3rd district, that I had this conversation with Chief Manger, that I thought that we really needed to take a hard look at potentially creating a 7th district and to have that primarily focused in the lower Silver Spring corridor, particularly around the business district. So I am currently, I have appointed Captain Dave Reed to initiate really the beginnings of exploring and doing the research to support what I believe to be true. We are looking at, again, a workload analysis for the entire county. And again, when we look at our targeted areas, when we look at the highest calls for service, the 3rd district is at the top of the list. When you look at your most violent crimes that we deal with, the 3rd district is at the top of the list. And so with that added workload and what we think would be a more efficient way of policing, I think in the future that this county that we need to work towards a 7th district. For example, if you look at Fairfax County, which is equal to us in size, Fairfax County has 9 police districts. We have 6. And I think we've not grown with the times, and I think the time is now for us to give that a really hard look. And I think my prediction is going to come true, at least as long as I'm here. And we'll see if we can move towards really a vision of creating something for downtown Silver Spring. Now, I'm just going to say this because I saw this question in the chat, or at least the comment, and someone said, well, I think there's more crime since you all have moved physically out of downtown Silver Spring. And I want everyone to know that, yes, we moved the main station, which is everyone knows is in White Oak, but unlike a fire department, police officers are deployed in their respective beats in order to address. We don't respond from the police station to calls for service. That's not the way we function. And the other thing I wanted to note is that we do have a footprint in fire station number 1. So we have our central business district officers who are assigned to downtown Silver Spring. That is where their shift offices are, and they actually do work in downtown Silver Spring. So they are not responding from the White Oak main station. They are responding from right there at down on Georgia Avenue.
The issue that you bring up about the station, when I attended a regional meeting, this was with Mr. Folger and Mr. Lee and hundreds of people from the community in the Folger building there at the intersection of, Colesville and Georgia. I think 95% of the people present there, and most of them were residents, overwhelmingly wanted another police station and district established in Silver Spring. That was the community. It was overwhelmingly supported by the people that were there, supporting what Marcus just laid out.
Yeah, that's what
the community wants.
That's been my experience. Let me ask, I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but one of the things that's been concerning to me is hate crimes in the county, especially the rise of anti-Semitism and vandalism and that kind of thing. I guess your office is attack it differently, but I wonder if you have any observations that you could share about why that is happening. Why is it happening in schools? Seem to be pretty prevalent in schools, and what, if anything, your offices can do with that.
Yeah, it is definitely an alarming trend, and it's disturbing to add to that. I'll start with the schools. I think this is important. I've been working with Dr. McKnight, and my staff and her staff have really wanted to make sure we have clear lines of communication. And most importantly, we want to make sure events are reported. I mean, we know of some horrible events that received, I should say, media attention. For example, over at Walt Whitman, when we had the facing of their outside of their school and the vandalism. I'm talking about the hatred of Jews. And that is, again, something that has sort of been trending all throughout Montgomery County. And it's very disturbing. And we document every event. And this is one of the things I wanted to make sure we were on the same page with the school system, because I wanted to make sure that we were documenting events that were occurring not only outside of the schools, but we were seeing some events with swastikas and other vulgar hatred of wording in the schools themselves. And so all of those are being reported. So I think we're going to see higher numbers, particularly in 2022 when the annual report comes out, and 23 is still trending that same way. Why do I think that? I think there's a lot of vitriol information out on social media. I don't know all of the reasons why. We have had some cases where we've seen individuals who have been involved in some hate crimes, such as some arsons that involve, for example, a church, a religious institution. So what are the reasons behind it? I don't think we have all the answers. I think there's probably there's a variety of different thoughts behind that. But I know social media plays a big role in this. And we're seeing younger people who I'm not sure quite understand all of what they get involved in sometimes and utilizing hatred language. But it's something I think that this community needs to be made aware of. So I'll let John speak to prosecution of these types of events should they come his way.
Yeah, again, we spend a lot of time in the community educating. I actually was at a temple over off Grub Road Sunday night 2 weeks ago, talking to a temple group there at 7 o'clock in the evening, and we try to educate the difference between hate incidents and hate crimes, and there is a difference. There are some things that are completely despicable and hateful, but they don't amount to criminal behavior because it's protected by the First Amendment. Having said that, one of the things that I've studied and I've done presentations on hate crimes in the United States and in Montgomery County, the numbers are up. The numbers are up. The zip code that has the highest number of hate crime incidences in Montgomery County is 20850, which is actually Rockville. That's the highest. And I would also say to you, one of the things that Montgomery County has, which is somewhat unique, if you look at hate crimes across the country, almost invariably, the group that is targeted most often for hate crime is the African-American community. That's almost always the case. Montgomery County has something sadly in common with the city of New York. In New York City, the group that is most frequently targeted for hate crimes and hate incidences is the Jewish community. And that is actually also true in Montgomery County. Statistically, and the numbers are not huge, but as everybody knows, hate crimes have a disproportionate impact on a community because a hate crime affects everyone who identifies with that particular group. So we've had that issue. One of the things I am proud of is the Anti-Defamation League gives something that they created. It's called the Shield Award. It's given to a local jurisdiction, a local prosecutor's office that is aggressively addressing hate in the community. They created this award in 2013. The first local prosecutor's office in the country that won the Shield Award was my office. 2 years later, we won it for the second time. There's a lot of things you get proud of. I am very proud of the fact that we are nationally recognized for our aggressive way we prosecute and address the issues. And I will also say, if I'd invite you to the chief's website. I'm going to tell you the Montgomery County Police do in fact put out on their website, they detail every hate crime. They tell you each one of the incidents, they have a summary of what's happening there. You can see, and there's a lot of transparency here. But I think we also have a highly educated community that knows the importance of reporting hate in the community. One of the things that I try to talk about is to communities where maybe the Hispanic Latino community, where I know they're targeted far more often than they report, or maybe the Asian American communities, where they're targeted far more often than they report. Educating all of our communities. In order for us to deal intelligently with hate, we need to know what the real numbers are, who's being targeted, and by whom. So communication, reporting is very important when it comes to hate so that we can intelligently address it and educate everybody who lives in our community. And what is also sad, if you look at the numbers, look at the statewide numbers, you were talking about the incidents in schools. Schools are the #1 place that hate crimes occur in the state of Maryland. Schools. And a lot of your offenders, most of the situations that we're talking about, they're young kids. Now, are they affected by social media? Are they affected by the nonsense put out by these white hate groups? You know, these militant white groups that just preach hate against everybody, and these kids are soaking this stuff up, or are they getting it in their homes? You know, I don't know the answers to the questions, but I know that we have I know the chief is, and the police try to be transparent on it. We have zero tolerance for it. And we are very aggressive in our prosecutions of hate crimes.
Well, let me ask you this, State's Attorney, how do you treat juvenile offenders? Somebody's been identified as a vandal and they're 15 years old. What happens to them?
Well, you know, I really appreciate that question for the following reason. One of the things that people fail to recognize is that of any juvenile who commits any kind of crime, what percent out of, let's say if the percentage is 100, how many ever wind up being charged and put in court? It's about 20%. 1 in 5. Most, as a matter of fact, over 50% are held at intake. What am I talking about? If you are under the age of 18, you're charged with a crime. I don't have the authority as state's attorney to charge you. You go to a civilian employee at the Department of Social Services who's called an intake worker, usually, and they do an informal adjustment and they decide whether the case gets forwarded to my office or not. So the reality is your question, Alan, presupposes that I have control over that. And I don't, because who I see is who they forward to me. And there are a couple of exceptions to that, but for the most part, a child under 18, and you said a 15-year-old child, I'm going to tell you, if that child doesn't have a prior record, I'm never seeing that kid. The kid that you just talked about, I'm never seeing that kid. That case is going to be informally adjusted at intake by the worker who works for DJS, which, by the way, that can breed cynicism on behalf of people enforcing the law when they may take a kid in and see the same kid out the next day because nothing happened. That can breed some cynicism into it. But again, I don't control who they get charged. It's a civilian employee for the Department of Juvenile Services, and the Department of Juvenile Services is not controlled by Montgomery County. The Department of Juvenile Services is a statewide agency, and they are state employees who don't want to work in Montgomery County because it's too expensive to live here. And so the workers turn over all the time. But in any instance, we control who gets prosecuted in the adult area. We don't control who gets prosecuted in the juvenile area. That is a statewide agency making those calls. And we're never seeing the kid that you just, the example you gave, we're not seeing that kid.
We're coming close to the end of our time. I've got a question for the chief and then a question for both of you. And the question for the chief is, what's happening with the 911 service? So on St. Patrick's Day, I was coming back from the Limerick, going down University Boulevard, come back to Silver Spring. I saw a man in distress at the corner of Fern Street and University Boulevard. Obviously couldn't get up, looked like he was having some kind of seizure. I wasn't driving, I was a passenger. I called 911. I was on the phone for 5 minutes before somebody picked up the phone and asked me what was going on. By that time, I had sort of left the scene. She asked me if I could go back. I couldn't go back. Are you having a serious problem with 911 response times?
So the answer is no, but there are times, Alan, that I will say we do have numerous calls to fill at one time. And I'll give an example. I think as folks know that when we have major incidents that can occur in the county, and I'll just make something simple. Let's say it could be a car crash on the Beltway. There could be a fire somewhere, and you have, let's say, numerous callers because of the availability of cell phones. We can get inundated in the system on the 911. So I will say it is true that we have a lower number of 911 call takers, and dispatchers available than we would like. We are definitely low in those numbers. But we feel we monitor our response times, how long it takes us on average to answer the 911 calls. We do an analysis of that every month. And those numbers have not risen over the past 3 years. They've remained consistent. But there are times, and I've heard this complaint before, and it's something that I talk to the director about often, to make sure that we are answering the calls for service in a timely manner. And so that's, again, and one of the things we stress to the public is we understand when people will pick up the phone, we want to make sure people stay on the phone, do not hang up and recall, because then if you hang up and then you go back into the queue, if there are numerous callers that are calling in. So we ask people to stay on the phone, and we will answer those calls as quickly as possible in order to get the proper resources to the problem that's at hand.
Yeah, it was concerning because I never found out what happened to
I
that
totally
guy.
understand. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
as we come to the conclusion, I know both of your offices are really engaged with the community and have given that priority. I know, Chief, that you're interested. You've been advocating for bringing back the Police Athletic League, and I wonder if you could both just talk briefly about how valuable after-school programs are, how they sort of fit into your vision, and
Right.
whether and importantly whether or not you're getting the response from the county council and the county executive that you would like.
So,
John, why don't you go first?
yeah, go
Well,
ahead,
let John go first.
Yeah, go ahead,
Well,
John.
I love sports. I love the idea. Look, I'm still here at Montgomery College. My last student has left, but I happen to have this day job as state's attorney, but I think of myself more as a teacher and a coach. I happen to be a member of the Montgomery County Athletic Hall of Fame for coaches. I believe keeping kids active. What did my mom used to tell me? Idle hands are the devil's workshop. If I think the county should require every child participate in extracurricular activities. Every child. Those precious hours between when a kid's latchkey and mom and dad aren't home. Stuff happens. Sex, drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and crime, and gangs. So I'm very much, if Marcus can get the Police Athletic League revitalized, I will be a volunteer coach for those kids. I think that's a fabulous idea. And any activity we can have for young people in the afternoon that keeps them engaged in a positive activity, I think is something that we should encourage, because kids just need safe places to exercise, to study, and do things together. I think it's a fabulous idea.
Chief?
Absolutely. And thank you, John, for that. And I definitely would use you as a coach. I will definitely say that, it has been my strong desire to bring back the Police Athletic League, because I believe that there's true value in it, beyond just the athletic part of it. It is an after-school program. It is a very constructive program that is just, that deals with homework club, but they also deal with conflict. There's a lot of programs that the officers work with them on. And I'll give a case in point. Last year, we were in the White Oak community. And again, it's not under the PAL umbrella, but we put together a Friday night basketball league in White Oak, which is, again, as most people know, is our highest crime police reporting area. And we actually observed our numbers go down when we had not only the kids that came, but their parents were there, fully involved, engaged. We did that for several weeks at a time, and we found that to be very productive. So I think it shows some value in what we're trying to focus on. It is my hope it is not in this coming budget. I've talked to the county executive before. I proposed it. I am really trying to re-energize our community engagement division, which is where I would like to see this fall under. This is something that I think that was a mistake that we eliminated several years back. So it is my desire and my hope that we would bring back PAL, because I think it is proven to be effective in many of, in particular, we look at the communities that need it the most.
Here. We support it, and we will be supportive of initiatives like that from the State's Attorney's Office and from MCPD. I'm going to turn it back to our President, Derek Neighbors, but State's Attorney John McCarthy and MCPD Chief Marcus Jones, thank you so much for joining us. I hope everybody found the conversation tonight as interesting as I did. Thank you so much for being a partner with our community, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Derek?
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. Thank you to the
Thank you.
Democratic Club as well. Thank you.
Honored.
Derek, you're muted.
Derek, you're muted. You're muted.
Still muted. I could thank you on behalf of Derek, but hopefully he'll get his sound back in a second. There's so many more questions to ask you, gentlemen. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do that. Just want to say nice things again about Dave McBain. He's been a real partner for the Silver Spring. He's been a real partner for the Silver Spring community.
But anyway, thank you, Chief Jones. Thank you, State's Attorney John McCarthy. And I'll leave you with what you always leave me with when I see you, John, is I'm inspired by both of them. Truly. 38 years in Silver Spring, never had an issue with Montgomery County Police. Of course, I lived there in the street, but nevertheless. But thank you, Alan, for moderating. Thank my Vice President, Phil Ackerman, along with his wife, Emily, my wife, Carla, and Tony and Tova, Hausner, Beth, Steve, Joy West, all members of Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club. We're also trying to recruit new membership, and it's a way to stay connected in the community and with the elected officials. And also, I'd like to extend to John McCarthy and Chief Jones an invite to our picnic, June 24th, right there at American Legion downtown. So with that, hopefully we can see you there. We can continue this conversation. And always, thanks again for accepting the invitation, being here. It's really informative. And of the 50 plus participants we have, hopefully they'll keep the connection going, spread the word to other friends and neighbors so that we all have this connection. We all call the police and state's attorney when we have a problem. Let's get together on a more mutual, happy note. And again, I thank you again. We look forward to seeing you all soon.